The town of Jupiter Island wishes to thank its generous event sponsors, Cognicare, an Alma neurocognitive specialty group managed by Dr. Amber Deckard, as well as the law firm of Alley Moss, Rogers and Lindsay, trusted legal counsel since 1950.
Welcome to the District 3 Martin County Commission Candidate Forum. Mr. Blake Capps was unable to attend today's recording with Mr. Frank D'Ambra and Miss Susan Gibbs Thomas due to a family medical issue out of town. Blake will answer the same questions next week upon his return, and we will edit his responses into the video accordingly. None of the candidates have received the questions ahead of time. This is really a special forum because the town of Jupiter Island is sponsoring this event. Thank you for asking the Casey Ingram Show to provide a platform for all three candidates at once for an in-depth discussion. The District 3 seat on the Martin County Commission is the southern part of the county from the ocean all the way over to Lake Okeechobee. It includes the greater Hobe Sound community, as well as the village of Indiantown and the town of Jupiter Island and everything in between. For this District 3 Martin County Commission seat, we have in alphabetical order, which is how they appear on your ballot: Blake Capps, Frank D'Ambra III, Susan Gibbs Thomas. Speaking of the town of Jupiter Island, I want to introduce my co-moderator, Kelly Lehman. Kelly has worked with Jupiter Island for more than a year now on his legislative interest in Tallahassee and Washington, D.C., and many other assignments that I've enjoyed hearing about. Kelly is a local hometown gal. She was raised right here in Jupiter and grew up on the Loxahatchee River. She recently returned home after a long career in both the public and private sectors. In addition to working on conservation and water issues with several Jupiter Island residents a long time ago, she worked in all three branches of state government in Tallahassee. She is also a partner in a software company that has the United States Department of Defense as one of its clients. Kelly, welcome, and tell us a little bit about why the town of Jupiter Island's leadership wanted to have this event.
Thank you, Casey. On behalf of the commission, as well as the town manager and its entire team, Jupiter Island is thrilled to sponsor this event, and we want to give special thanks to Indian River State College and to you for making this event happen under very tight conditions. The college's leadership team has been extraordinary in partnering with its community on this event. Most people know that Jupiter Island's focus has always leaned toward conservation and community building. The first reason for this event, and we're going to pull up a slide for you to see, is that District 3 is now an open seat on the ballot. We have three candidates, as Casey mentioned, giving voters a real voice and a real choice. They each offer something truly different, and they are qualified in terms of their experience with local government. Two candidates have sat in the hard seats of public office already: former Tequesta Mayor Frank D'Ambra and current Indiantown Mayor Susan Gibbs Thomas. Mr. Capps himself has run for offices before in Martin County and most recently sat as a volunteer on what could be called the most consequential decision board that approves or denies new development in Martin County. That's called the Local Planning Agency. So there should be enormous familiarity with the issues amid these three candidates. Anyone who takes on running for office today should be thanked. So we thank you for offering yourselves. The second reason for putting this event together is a tad longer, so bear with me. More than a century ago, many don't know that the town of Jupiter Island was briefly marketed as the East Coast version of Hollywood before some residents stepped in and purchased encumbered lands during the crash in the 1920s. A different development company had failed even before that. The north end of the island and the south end of the island were marketed under two different names for a while. Then a few homeowners bought the small community clubhouse and most of the available land. One of those partners, the Reed family, then bought out the other partners and oversaw things for 60 plus years. That era became a deep legacy of civic involvement, both near and far. Island residents have been providing astounding levels of discreet financial support, as many people know, to the community, to local public schools, and to many other entities. They have stepped up and literally transformed neighborhoods in the past. They have purchased or donated land to federal environmental and wildlife agencies. In fact, the Reed family donated what is today the county-run beach property at the end of Bridge Road in the 1940s. The town police officers are constantly responding to service calls there, and they do so willingly for any visitor or resident in need and to carry out their public safety mission. Jupiter Island residents, through their town taxes, also pay for year-round maintenance of the tree corridor that's iconic along Bridge Road that recently suffered 22 trees that felled into the road and were lifted by 2 cranes paid for by the town. That is the county's jurisdiction on Bridge Road west of the bridge, but the town pays for year-round maintenance, and they know it is a treasure to the local community and to them. You were asking me a little while ago about the incredible full reopening of Bridge Road only 6 or 7 days after the tornado. And yes, Jupiter Island, supported by local debris contractors, handled the vast majority of that work in partnership with Martin County. Jupiter Island does not take a bow. They usually just get in there, do the necessary work, and move on to the next issue, and that's how it's been. So Jupiter Island is quietly but most assuredly vested in the community in a lot of ways people do not see, and we'll talk a little bit as we go through the questions about that. The third quick reason for the town wanting to help Martin County voters in this district race is really simple and easy, and it's that district map that we talked about. We're showing the boundaries again as we get started. Look at the sheer mass of District 3, and you can clearly see the consequential future for Martin County. Hobe Sound locals know it well. There are major opportunities, and some would say time is running short. Jupiter Island residents feel that way too. This slide, if you can't quite see the key, also is the district boundaries for the school board seats. And the school board seats are equally important and, of course, a substantial part of our property tax bill as well. The town is honored to put this event together with you, Casey. Looking forward to this discussion so that Martin County voters can have more information to decide who will have the honor of sitting on the dais on the Martin County Commission for this district. Thank you.
Kelly, thank you so much for that overview of everything that Jupiter Island is doing and the things that have done in that tree tunnel is absolutely iconic for all of us here in Martin County, and so glad that it was able to be saved. But let's take some time now to review the basics for the audience. First of all, this taping will be a total of 90 minutes, which sounds like a lot of time, but it's not with 3 candidates. We have designed a wide range of issues with different types of questions, so we can move through items quickly. I'm honored to introduce our esteemed timekeeper for today, the former Martin County property appraiser, the highly respected Laurel Kelly. Known for her dedication and excellence in public service, Laurel has made significant contributions to our community. Thank you, Laurel. Thank you for graciously taking on this role. We appreciate it. We're grateful. And candidates, please watch her cues and kindly respect them. We have opportunities for long answers, but we also have yes, no that will help voters truly understand exactly where you sit on certain issues. We will let you know how much time you have to answer each question. The majority of questions will allow 1. We also want to restate to our viewers that the candidates have not seen any of these questions in advance, and we appreciate that all 3 of them have agreed to participate. So now, before we get into our questions, we'd like to give each of the candidates 2 minutes to tell us a little bit about themselves, and then we'll go into the questions. So I'm going to start, ladies first, with Susan Gibbs.
Appreciate the opportunity. I am a 4th-generation resident of Martin County. I've raised my boys here, my 2 sons, and I have just welcomed a brand new first grandchild into Martin County. So that's 6 generations. This is our home. And whether you've been here 6 generations or 6 weeks, we all want the same thing and require the same thing from our. We need responsible, physically responsible government. So that is what I bring to the table. We want and we require in our county a quality of life that we've become accustomed to. And it's public safety, it's clean water, includes physical responsibility in our budgeting, and also our open spaces and our wildlife. Moving forward, I am a defender of that our quality of life, and look forward to going on the commission and continuing on with that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. D'Ambra.
Thank you, Casey. Thank you for hosting this forum here today. I'm Frank D'Ambra. I'm obviously running for Commission's District 3. I'm relatively new to Martin County. We spent the last 21 years in the Martin County, Tequesta area. 20 of those were in Tequesta. We moved up to Martin County a year ago. We made the move because we were looking for a place for our extended family. So it's myself, my wife, my 2 daughters who are single moms, and I have 3 grandchildren who all made the move with us. And we all live on a family compound in Hope Hills. My grandsons are 15, 14, and I also have a relatively new grandbaby, a baby girl who's a year old. When we made the move up here, it wasn't necessarily my intention to run at this point in time, but as I got up here, and I've, again, my familiarity with Martin County, the 20 years in Tequesta, is, I'm very comfortable, very familiar with the issues. But as I started speaking with longtime friends and new neighbors and talking about what their concerns were and what the issues were going forward, people basically were encouraging me to run. They said, we think you can make a positive and meaningful difference in the county. By way of experience, I started out in business in the private sector, working for companies that did retirement plans. So we designed, implemented, administrated, and invested retirement funds. I started out in sales and moved to sales management at a national level. And then I ran businesses for GE Financial, Swiss Re, and Horace Mann. And we did retirement plans for both private companies as well as public sector, teachers, et cetera. So I had responsibility for as many as 400 employees, sales of $4 billion, and assets in excess of $10 billion. My public service experience was in Tequesta. I spent almost 10 years on the council, also as mayor and vice mayor. So I'm very familiar with all the issues that come in a public environment in terms of not only the local issues, but state and federal, and the necessity of building relationships if you're going to try and achieve and get the things done that you need to. And I'm also, a big reason we came up here obviously was this Martin County difference that was important to myself and my family. And this is where we're planning our long-term roots.
Good morning. I'm Blake Capps, and I'm running for Martin County Commissioner, District 3. As was mentioned previously, District 3 is the southern part of Martin County, encompassing Hobe Sound and Jupiter Island, and also encompassing Indiantown and what we call South County, which is that portion of Jupiter and Tequesta down by County Line Road. I want to tell you that I'm deeply vested in our community. I'm a 47-year resident of Hobe Sound. We moved to Hobe Sound when I was 13 and in the 8th grade. I met my wife of 39 years here, and we have raised 3 adult children in our community who still live in Hobe Sound, just a couple of miles north from our home. They're gainfully employed in our community, which we are very grateful for. Our church is here. Most of our family or our friends are here. We have run a family business in Martin County for 31 years, serving thousands of Martin County residents, which has been a great joy in my life. And now it is time to give back and to make a difference in public service. Thank you very much.
I have the next question, and we're going to start with you,
Okay.
Frank. It's about donations. Can you provide transparency on how your campaign funds are sourced and how you ensure that donor contributions do not unduly influence your policy positions or decisions if elected? You have 1 minute.
That's a great question. And I have publicly made statements on this. First of all, I'm not proactively soliciting donations. We have a donation site on my webpage. If people would like to donate, that's great. But we will not accept any donations from anybody in the development community, anybody in real estate. I'm prepared to fully self-fund the campaign if necessary. The reason I'm not taking donations from anybody in the real estate arena is that I don't want there to even be an appearance of a conflict of interest. The commissioner's responsibility is to the residents. Our allegiance is to the residents. So I don't want there to again, even a question about where my fidelity lies in that regard. And so that's the approach that we're taking.
Well, the money that we have raised for our campaign, almost all of it has come from Martin County residents, and we're very proud of that. Some candidates in the commission races are heavily funded by developers. We are not heavily funded by developers. Other candidates in the race have had enormous amounts of money that have not only come from outside of Martin County, but outside of the state of Florida. Many, many thousands of dollars into their campaigns, but that is not the case in my campaign. Virtually all the money that has come directly from residents in our community, so we're very grateful for that.
Thank you, Ms. Susan Gibbs Thomas.
Thank you. My supporters that have donated to my campaign are people that I have come in contact with, that I've had the opportunity to get to know and to work with. And they know me to be a honest, critical thinker. They know that I listen, and everybody has a right to be heard. And I listen in order to learn, in order to build a consensus, because that's what we have to have moving forward. So I listen and learn with nobody getting special treatment. Nobody receives special treatment, but everybody has a right to be heard.
Thank you. And I'm going to piggyback on that question. Could you explain the reasons behind accepting out-of-state donations for your campaign and how they align with your commitment to representing local interest? 1 minute.
Because you live out of state does not mean that you don't have a local interest. There are property owners that live in other states, and it may be a friend, it may be a relative, whatever it is, that feel like they want to support somebody who is a honest, critical thinker that has integrity. And I believe that that's what my supporters know me as.
I don't have any campaign contributions from outside of the state, so we think that's good.
Thank you, Frank.
Again, in my situation, any donations that we receive would be coming from local folks. When we talk about out of state, if somebody owns property here, obviously they're entitled to a voice, as well as somebody who may be residing here year round. But other than those types of individuals, again, this is a local campaign for the county on local issues and the concerns that people have here. And I can't imagine too many situations where somebody out of state would be donating who doesn't have a particular interest at heart that they're trying to promote or move forward. So again, from my vantage point, I want it to be very clear to people that my allegiance is to the residents of Martin County. That's who I'm representing. Public office is a public service and it's a sacred trust. And the people who are voting and putting commissioners in place need to know that whoever's on that commission is going to fulfill that sacred trust and honor the privilege that they've been given to serve.
Thank you.
The Board of County Commissioners for Martin County is already on the record endorsing the half-cent sales tax on the November ballot for land acquisition. The citizens group that put this forward, called Martin County Forever, has not proposed a specific list of acquisitions, just what they're calling target areas. Property owners, of course, have to be willing sellers as well. The county's endorsement hinged on an independent advisory committee that will have considerable responsibilities for this undertaking, meaning how to spend the tax revenue as it becomes available. What type of person do you want to see appointed to this group, and which of the 4 target areas are you most passionate about?
Yes, as far as the half-cent sales tax and the purchase of conservation lands in Western Martin County, that is a huge priority on my agenda to help the water quality in our rivers ultimately. And as far as this committee that's going to supervise this effort, certainly we ought to be heavily looking at people with an environmental background. They're going to be best suited to know what land should be purchased. And what was the other item?
Which of the 4 target areas are you most passionate about?
Right, I would say that would be the Loxalucy area in western Hobe Sound, since I'm from Hobe Sound, and I would be very passionate about that. In order to reestablish historic water flows between the Atlantic Ridge State Park and Jonathan Dickinson State Park, and also the wildlife corridors that connect those 2 great state parks.
What type of person? An independent person from every sector. And what needs to be targeted? There is, I know that I have seen that presentation put on by the Martin County Forever. And they have, like you say, they have indicated parcels where there is willingness, and they have the guide rails put up on what can be that money specifically used for. And it incorporates in that wildlife corridor and completes that, because Martin County has over 70,000 acres in land, wildlife and parks and such. So it adds to, and it is definitely worth the people of Martin County considering identity support.
Completion of the wildlife corridor between Dickinson and the Atlantic Hills Parks is absolutely the #1 target from my vantage point. In terms of who should be on that panel, again, we're looking for people who have familiarity with the area, who understand the sensitivity of the environmental lands that we have out there, that hopefully owners might be willing to sell, so that we have individuals who, again, understand the environmental elements, understand the impact it has on water quality, on quality of life, and they're able to balance those things and make an informed and educated judgment. I do think that the sales tax, if the commission is going about the right way, they put it as a referendum to the voters. They should be the ones who directly decide this. But if they decide in favor of it, again, if we have the right people on it and the right lands targeted, it can be a win-win for everybody.
Thank you. The Florida Department of Transportation is currently studying a new system-to-system interchange between Florida's Turnpike and Interstate 95 in the vicinity of Bridge Road. While a full interchange with public access to an exit and entry at the Turnpike on Bridge Road is not in the near-term plans for the foreseeable future, would you support or oppose a full Turnpike interchange at Bridge Road? Mr. D'Ambra, first, you have up to a minute.
You're correct. At this point in time, they're only talking about a crossover between the Turnpike and 95 without a full-fledged interchange. At this juncture, I would be inclined to oppose it. Don't know that there's significant value. You can get on the Turnpike just north, or you can get on the Turnpike just south, and the disruption that interchange would cause to the land area around it. And people are always concerned when we have those kinds of, again, I'm not arguing against forward planning. We need forward strategic planning when it comes to roads and all of our other infrastructure. But there's always that concern that if you were to develop something like that, it could be a draw for people wanting to come in and develop around it. Now, again, the commission has the ability to constrain that and prevent that from happening. But I think at this point, just the pure disruption of the land and the area that's around it is unnecessary. Again, you can get on north or south, and I don't think the few minutes that it saves warrants the destructive impact that it would have on the land.
Thank you, Ms. Gibbs-Thomas.
Thank you. I sit on the MPO, and I have heard that whole design and the different designs that they have and options. And it does not allow for, it is solely for just the interchange. There will not be a crossover. It does not allow for an interchange. There's not the land. There's not the need for it, honestly. And so I would not be in favor of, because of the impact and what it does to the area, and looking at the future and the way that it was presented and it's laid out by the DOT, it's not even an option going forward. Once that crossover is done, it's just what it is.
Yes, I would not want to see an interchange onto Bridge Road. The plan that is in place right now, or that's being talked about the most the MPO meetings, is to have a system where people can switch from I-95 to the turnpike back and forth, and not necessarily to have an interchange on Bridge Road. I don't think Bridge Road can handle that kind of traffic, and we wouldn't want to see hundreds and hundreds of additional cars on Bridge Road coming into Hobe Sound, because Bridge Road is already pretty busy at peak traffic times in the mornings and in the evenings.
Staying on lands, preserving lands and land acquisition, and specifically Bridge Road. There's a group you know of comprised of several nonprofits called the Loxahatchee Headwaters Initiative. That's a combination shorthand for Loxahatchee River and St. Lucie River and the watershed that sits between the two. In 2021, this group purchased 138 acres abutting Bridge Road. It's a long sliver, you may know, that runs for 2 miles along Bridge Road, just west of US 1. They now have identified another smaller parcel on the southern side of Bridge Road. What is your understanding, changing gears a little bit, of Martin County's public land holdings along Bridge Road? And what would you like to see Bridge Road look like in 5 to 10 years?
Right. Loxalucy is a huge priority of mine, and something that I think is near and dear to the residents of South County and District 3, the people of Hobe Sound, the people of Jupiter Island, and all of Martin County. The beauty of Loxalucy and what it would bring to us is establishing these historic water flows between the Atlantic Ridge State Park and Jonathan Dickinson State Park, and also the wildlife corridors that connect the two. So it's a huge priority. If we can garner resources for Loxalucy locally, that places us higher on the priority list with the state program called Florida Forever, and so that we can leverage a little bit of our money and get a lot of state money to purchase those lands and other conservation lands in western Martin County.
I think, as I've talked with people, particularly in the Hobe Sound area, they want to maintain that corridor as natural a state as they possibly can. We talked earlier about the 1/2 cent sales tax and funds that would flow from that. I think there's an opportunity, as you're alluding to, for the county to work together with nonprofit groups like this to acquire environmentally sensitive lands, preserve those lands, again, complete the Atlantic Ridge to Jonathan Dixon corridor. So aside from, for example, Discovery, which has already been approved, I think we should be limiting any development along that Bridge Road corridor and maintaining it in its natural state to the extent we possibly can.
Thank you.
I think there's a common consensus in Martin County and its residents and those running that as much needs to be preserved as possible. And I know because preservation is paramount to our quality of life. So moving forward, keeping as much natural and enhancing the water quality and those projects in order to make that happen is the number one priority. Absolutely.
Thank you. I will start with Ms. Gibbs Thomas. In 2018, Hobe Sound residents defeated a ballot measure that would have incorporated Hobe Sound. If the issue were to be proposed in the future, are you supportive or opposed to the ballot measure? You have up to 1 minute.
I support the residents in Hobe Sound for their opportunity to once again speak to that. I know that issue came to Indiantown, and we had the opportunity, and the residents spoke, and they said that they wanted to incorporate. I personally had voted no against it, and because it was another layer of government and another layer of taxes. However, the people in Indiantown chose to incur that layer of taxes in order to have representation that they needed. So in serving as the mayor out there for 3 of the last 6 years that I've been on that council, the people have spoken and are stepping up into what they wanted to see their town to look like. And I am there to serve them no matter how I voted. You know, we're all in the same boat. And it is to move forward how the public wants to be done.
Yes. The issue of whether to incorporate our town was a big issue in Hobestown. It was had a fascinating rollout and a fascinating result. It was interesting how the people who pushed it pushed really hard, and the people who were against it, all they did was put out some yellow and orange signs that said, "Keep Hobestown great, do not incorporate." And they, as we all know, they won very handily. I had very mixed feelings about it at the time, and I think it probably ended up the way it should have ended up. Particularly seeing what has happened in Indiantown, which did become a town of its own, and you know they're having some financial struggles at the moment. So I think things worked out the way they should.
Thank you. Mr. D'Ambra.
You know, I'm of the firm belief that residents in a particular area they have that voice and they have a right to determine whether they'd like to incorporate or not. I know it fell short last time. And speaking with a number of the people who were in Hobestown at the time, they felt that the process had gotten corrupted, that there were outside interests, developer interests that were coming in, and perhaps the concept of what it was supposed to be and what it was turning into were two very different things. Now, whether that was misinformation, it's hard to say, but they obviously voted it down. The whole purpose of having that local control, obviously, is to give the residents more voice, more power over exactly what happens within their community. So if it were to come back up again, and people said, yeah, we'd like to take another look at it, perhaps with some different guardrails and some different other constraints that ensure that what the residents truly want, then I would certainly support giving the residents that opportunity.
Thank you.
Martin County Commissioners, just days ago, breaking news, tentatively approved next year's fiscal budget. A lot would have to happen for any numbers to change at this point, but as the saying goes, you never know. They have about another month to voice their opinion until the final public hearing. The county commissioners have voted for a decrease in millage. They are reducing by less than 0.5 percentage point, while the overall spending will go up 5% because of increased property values across Martin County. But again, county commissioners, giving credit where credit is due, voted for a reduced millage in ad valorem. As alluded to earlier, Jupiter Island is a donor community. Jupiter Island residents contribute 10.3% of the ad valorem. They're less than 900 residents. That means 0.005 of the Martin County residency is contributing 10.3 to the ad valorem silo and bucket. Any citizen watching this would like their property tax bill to go down. In the same correlating way that property values are increasing, if possible. Can you please offer a few details on your mindset about where Martin County is with its budget and its millage rates? You have up to a minute. We'll start with Mr. D'Ambra.
You are correct that with increasing property values, taxes are going to go up every year. 3% if you're homesteaded, 10% if you're not. Correspondingly, obviously the county faces increasing costs. So if you want quality public safety in terms of your fire rescue, your police, and other services that are provided, those you can look for efficiencies in those operations, and you should. But you're going to have some increasing costs, and obviously you have to have some revenues to meet that. I don't think at this point, I can't see going forward any necessity for millage rates to increase at all. I think the revenue stream that's being provided to the county at this point, if anything, should allow for, hopefully some additional decreases as we go forward. Government, while it has different measurables versus a private enterprise, Nevertheless, they need to run lean, mean, and they need to be efficient. And the commissioners have a responsibility working with staff to always look for those efficiencies and ways to reduce costs.
Thank you. Yes, was in that commission meeting and listened to the process. And it is a good thing that the commission went with the rollback rate, because it does, even though people's tax bill did go up because the estimates or the values went up, it didn't go up as much as it could have. And am thankful for that realization. And moving forward with the budget, you do have certain aspects that they're self-funded, which is encouraging, which is a good thing. And you also have to realize the increases, because we all have it in our budgets. So we need to make sure that the physical responsibility in every department head, every avenue that it is taken advantage of.
Yes, on the budget, what I would say is that I would have a stated goal of not raising millage rates. With all of the increase in property values that we have seen in recent years, and with all of the new development that has come into Martin County, we should surely be able to tighten our belts and live within our means and hold the millage steady and not to raise the millage. As far as a few broad things that we could do to make sure that we keep our taxes in line, one of the things that I'm very interested in my personal life and in my business life is repairing and maintaining things rather than replacing things at very high costs. That's something that appeals to me. Another thing is to look at departments to see if we can operate more efficiently with less people as people retire. With improved technologies, that is an area of savings that could happen. And then, okay.
Next question for you, Ms. Gibbs Thomas. Given your understanding of the county's budget, are there specific areas where you believe reductions could be made without significantly impacting essential services? Please elaborate on which area you would consider for cuts and the rationale behind your recommendations. You have 1 minute.
That's a tough one to tackle in 1 minute. There's always areas that you can look and cut some fat in. Honestly, right now, I cannot speak to which ones. I know which ones that I kind of like to eye at and make sure that it is lean. Because reality is, when there is a downturn, the county has a way of cutting and getting lean and mean, and we should do it in the good times as well as the bad times. So it is there, and it's just sharpening the pencil and getting in each department to take care of it.
Thank you. Mr. D'Ambra.
Yeah, I'll take it a step further. When I was at GE and I ran one of their businesses, they had what they called the Six Sigma program. And Six Sigma was all about process improvement. And how do you get to, and it basically stands for 1 error in every 6 million transactions. So how do you get to that point? And it's a matter then of working not from top down necessarily, but from the bottom up to look at your processes and procedures and get the ideas from those staff people that are, on the ground, to improve those processes and procedures to become more efficient and more effective. So I think that's where you start. And I think if you take that kind of approach, you will find opportunities for cost savings. And it's not just cost savings in the sense of today, but it's also by improving processes and procedures going forward and may lessen the need for additional employees. They're more productive. They deliver a greater value to the residents. So I think bringing that type of thought process, the Six Sigma process, into government, where we have a lot of redundant services, I think can be very effective in looking for opportunities to have government run as lean and mean as possible.
Thank you.
Yes, as far as cuts are concerned, like I mentioned before, I think that oftentimes we can repair and maintain things rather than replacing things. And then I believe we can probably operate government departments with less people as people retire and technology improves. And then an item of last resort for cuts would be the delaying of capital improvement projects when necessary to do so, to keep our taxes in line.
Staying on the county budget, last set of questions, and before I tee this up, there are 3 yes or no questions, just
Okay.
to give you a fair warning.
Right.
Okay. We're also going to show the slide again of the county budget over the years. The ad valorem portion, as it has increased, is along the bottom.
Mhm.
And on the top, for our viewers, the ad valorem portion from property taxes is, as you can see, by any measure, the lion's share of the $672 million budget that the county is dealing with. But let's talk about a specific item in the budget. One of the refrains that's heard over and over each budget cycle is about the short list of local charities that receive tax dollars. There are a handful of charities in the budget because certain county commissioners want them to be there. These groups do wonderful work, just like hundreds of other groups across Martin County that are not on the list. And we all support charities in our private life. This is several $100,000 in the budget, which when we're looking at the slide doesn't seem like much, but every dollar counts, right? As you both alluded to. The county also has to approve the countywide constitutional officers' budgets and the judicial circuit. That includes retiring Sheriff William Snyder's budget, which I think we can all agree is under tremendous pressure of late with crime. Many residents notice how hard the sheriff's office is working on all the crime just related to undocumented folks and drug cartels and retail smash and grabs. This is our first lightning round. It's a set of 3 questions. I'll ask them one at a time. Mr. D'Ambra first. Are you fine with this practice of commissioners placing these checks to private charities in the budget? Yes or no?
Yes or no? I'd like to have a more thoughtful answer, but I'm going to say no.
No.
Will you be adding new nonprofits to the list of payees in the county budget as a commissioner?
No.
No.
Would you want all of the nonprofits listed in the county budget right now staying in the first county budget you vote on this time next year?
I'm going to say no.
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 Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to slide 2, which is the MPO Development Review Interactive Map. The Rural Lifestyle Amendment adopted in September 2022 requires a minimum of 1,000 contiguous acres for the Rural Lifestyle Future Land Use Designation with specific density and easement requirements. The 2024 Plan Amendment for Calusa Ranch allowed properties with a minimum of 3,000 acres within 6,000 feet of an urban service district to be eligible for the designation, but with a density limit of 1 unit per 20 acres and without additional easement requirements. Meanwhile, the Story project proposes 4,000 residential units and 825,000 square feet of non-residential uses, resulting in 1.47 acres per unit, and is outside the urban service boundary. As currently proposed, Story does not comply with the Rural Lifestyle Amendment and will require a comprehensive plan amendment. Story was previously proposed under the Harmony Ridge proposal, which was denied by the current Board of County Commissioners on the same day a similar project, Pineland Prairie, now Newfield, was approved. Harmony has sued the county, which is currently on hold while the Story application is being processed. If Story is denied, they potentially will continue the lawsuit against Martin County, which, if found in their favor, has been estimated to cost taxpayers in excess of $100 million. Given these developments in agricultural Western Martin County, do you support any comp plan amendments for the Story project? Ms. Gibbs-Thomas, you have 1 minute.
No, I do not. From what I understand, it does not fit the rural lifestyle and the foundation and the basis that it is. So, no.
As most of us know, the proposed community of Story, Florida, is at the 4-way stop out there in western Martin County, Pratt and Whitney Road and Bridge Road. The landowners own all four corners of that land and want to build like 5,000 houses there, which we think would be really inappropriate for that area and would really clog up Bridge Road and make Hobe Sound life completely different. So I am definitely opposed to the story development and to comprehensive plan amendments that would allow it. And I would not be interested in moving the urban services boundary to the west to enable Story to do what they're endeavoring to do.
Mr. D'Ambra.
My answer is also no. In fact, I'll go even further. I think the developer in this case has been very disingenuous. I know when I met with the county attorney, we were talking about the Story proposal because I'd been running ads on TV. And if you looked at the ads they were running on TV, it made it sound like this was already a done deal, which I took great offense to. I know that they had pursued legal action before. I know that it was put on hold after they'd gone through the entire process and they were ready to go to court. And there was a stay put on this. But again, this gets back to, are we willing to fight for what we believe? If we believe that Martin County difference, that agricultural rural component, low density in the county with very tight constraints on growth is what's in everybody's best interest, there are times you have to stand up and fight for it. And I understand there's a risk if you lose, but I do think that the facts are on the county side in this case. So the answer is no. And if we have to take legal action to hopefully prevail in that regard, I would say we go for it.
Follow-up question with both of you. Mr. D'Ambra first. How do you balance the need for development with the preservation of open space and the integrity of the urban service boundary?
That's a great question. I think when we talk about preserving Martin County, it isn't just about what happens outside the urban development district. It's also what happens within it. And the neighborhood advisory committees are very important in this regard. We only have 5 municipalities in the county. Palm Beach, for example, has 37. So that's the first touch point for many of the residents in Palm Beach. But in Martin County, the county is not only the county government, but it's also that touch point. So those neighborhood advisory committees under the auspices of the CRA are very, very important in trying to preserve and move forward with a character and ambiance that the residents desire. So those resident voices through the advisory committee and through the CRA are critically important to make sure that urban development within that urban boundary, fits within what their goals and desires are. And when we talk about the fundamental character of the county, that fundamental character of the county is preserved.
Thank you. Ms. Gibbs-Thomas.
Can you repeat that question again?
How do you balance the need for development with the preservation of open space and the integrity of the urban service boundaries? 1 minute.
Balance. That is a hard thing. Moving forward, because people have property rights. And they do have a right to utilize their property. But when you have to drastically change that in order for them to satisfy what they want to do, you have to make sure that the commission, listening to your local voices, has planned. We're doing 10, 20, and manage and shape what that looks like. So you're not making these radical decisions that, okay, well, we're going to do that. It's already in the plan. You already know what the people want, and you're taking those steps and planning and adhering to it as you move along. So there is a balance. You listen to the voices, you listen to the people, and you kind of come to a consensus.
Well, what I would say about Western Martin County development and open space is that our comprehensive plan has worked very well for us for over 40 years. Many are trying to advocate that we need to change the rules for Western Martin County. But the rules that we have had have been very, very effective. Look at the results. The proof is in the pudding. Which county along the region is still largely green to the west? It's Martin County. It's the Martin County difference, and it's the Martin County comprehensive plan, and it has worked.
Staying on this Martin County metropolitan planning organization, and Casey's slide that she introduced, this customized map for the forum, we can see clearly the critical role that MPO plays in addressing developments that residents are now attempting to follow. Even though this focuses a little bit on Bridge Road, all of those different small color blocks represent different items that the MPO is following. Mr. D'Ambra mentioned 5 municipalities within Martin County, and the vast majority of residents here do live outside of a municipality, so they live in unincorporated Martin County, but a good number are within a city or town or village, and that municipality determines their respective quality of life to a large degree. The town of Sewell's Point is about 2,000 residents and landlocked by water and essentially built out. The city of Stuart is more than 18,000 residents and approaching the same build-out status unless they annex. The town of Ocean Breeze up near Jensen Beach is incorporated and less than 300 residents. The town of Jupiter Island is about 900 residents, also landlocked. The village of Indiantown, as Mayor Susan Gibbs Thomas points out regularly, is coming back up in population pretty quickly after a major downtrend, and they stand at about roughly 6,500. All of these places, with the exception of Indiantown, have one really important item in common. None of them are close to a major interstate or the turnpike. They all need to drive about 8 to 14 miles, I checked, to get to a major highway. Common sense informs us that getting around means more vehicles and drivers needing to add more commuter time to go somewhere. The town of Jupiter Island is not on the board of the Martin County MPO. Roughly 40% of all of the proposed development we have on this slide at the MPO in the pipeline is taking place along Bridge Road in Hobe Sound, which is the corridor to get to and from the town and greater Hobe Sound. With these data points, this is another lightning round question. Do you think that it is imperative that the town of Jupiter Island sit alongside Indiantown, the city of Stuart, and the town of Sewell's Point as a voting member of the Martin County MPO? And will you personally advocate for that as a commissioner? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Next, before the state's growth management agency was disbanded about a decade ago, local governments had far more power to extract concessions from developers. Maybe they had to build a turn lane down the road. Maybe they had to give the local government other concessions, such as a stormwater program element or exceeding baseline regulations in some other way. Martin County was considered a leader in that regard, known the world over. Some of those door keys have now been taken away. Not only that, but the door opening is extremely narrow from Tallahassee to Martin County in Florida law. It doesn't mean things can't get done in that regard. It just takes strong, committed leadership with a thick skin. What creative way would you bring to the table to deal with this issue? And have you seen any amazing, creative, brilliant concessions in the past by Martin County that you would like to see repeated? And there have been many by county staff. They just don't get covered very much by the mainstream media because they're not necessarily contentious.
Yes. Well, many developments that come before the Board of County Commissioners turn into planned unit developments, PUDs, and those are negotiations between the county and the developer. And that's a great opportunity for county commissioners to have developers reassess and to revamp their plans with great matters of public benefit, like turn lanes and buffers and setbacks and that kind of thing. And I would certainly be interested in deploying the powers that county commissioners have over communities to make sure that they're being good neighbors to everyone around them.
So I think any developer who has a conscience and is worth their salt should want to be embraced by the community. So if somebody comes forward with a proposal, first of all, it needs to come to the commission as a concept for feedback. and then also feedback, obviously, from the community at large. As you indicated, staff and the commissioners working in concept with the developer, there are some limits on what you can impose, but there's no limits on what you can try to do to influence, positive changes, things that'll have a positive impact on the community. The developer should want to have community support. People have asked me, they said, aside from the comprehensive plan, which every commissioner pledges fidelity to, right? What is your thought process if somebody comes forward? And I said, I got 4 points. One is it has to be consistent and maintain the fundamental character of the community, whether it's outside the urban district or within it. The second thing is any infrastructure impacts that are going to occur, whether it's roads, water, sewer, schools, public safety, that should be borne by the developer. And again, you can bring community pressure, you can bring commission pressure, even if you can't absolutely legally impose it, you can bring pressures to bear on that developer to do the right thing. The third thing is if there's any kind of accommodation for the developer, there has to be a concurrent or greater benefit to the taxpayers in the community of Martin County. And if it meets all those 3 standards, it should have community support. If that developer cannot generate community support for that project, I don't think the commissioner should be saying yes.
Thank you.
That was a long question. I think your good developers know that they have to have what they present and what they are going to build in Martin County has to be quality, and they have to have the buy-in of the people that they are neighbors to. They have to be good neighbors. And we have seen some good developments. I know creative ways. I don't know how creative, but you have, and what I have seen and continue to see is when you have a development come in, they'd have schools. They're going to provide land in order, because they know the impact that they're going to have in that area. Also, fire stations. Well, I know out in western Martin County, that is a big concern of people out there, is there needs to be a fire station further out west in Palm City. And so I think your good developers listen, have their ear to the ground, know where they're coming into Martin County, and realize what they have to bring to the table in order to be a good neighbor, in order to fit in order to create that quality of life that everybody has come to require in Martin County.
Thank you.
Last question on growth-related issues. Recently, Martin County has been adding residents about 2% a year since 2018. We're about 165,000 residents. And 10 years ago, from 2014 through 2016, we only grew by 1% about a year and sat around 150,000 residents. There are 330,000 residents now in St. Lucie County to the north, and Port St. Lucie is the 6th largest city in Florida now. The fabulously talented economists in Tallahassee say that Florida's population has now crossed the 23 million mark this year as people continue to relocate to the Sunshine State, and we're the 3rd largest state in the country, of course, behind California and Texas. Give us a general meat on the bones answer, but there's no specific question here, about whatever is on your mind with growth. Ms. Thomas, and then Mr. D'Ambra, up to 1 minute.
Meat on the bones. We have to hold the line. We have to continue to require, and I don't want to say insignificant, it is significant, but 2% compared to what's north and south of us is actually kind of amazing at times that you think that we can hold the line on that, and we have to.
Well, growth is always the big issue in Martin County, and that's because we have residents who are so very, very passionate about maintaining the Martin County difference. And we have that Martin County difference because of our comprehensive plan that has done us well for over 40 years. You know, I've heard people say that we really aren't growing that much, but that is not the way Martin County residents feel at this time. They have seen a lot of growth, some of it in the city of Stuart, some of it in the county. But they're distressed about it, and they're anxious to see commissioners do what they can to control growth, and that's what I intend to do as your next commissioner.
Yeah, I mean, everyone I've spoken with, nobody wants to see Martin County evolve the way our 3 neighboring counties to the south have, with all the development they've seen, nor what's happening with St. Lucie County either. So that 2% benchmark is probably a good benchmark that we want to continue to move forward with. There's no question most people are not anti-growth, but what they are for is very smart, very constrained growth. And the comprehensive plan, if allowed to work properly, provides those constraints, provides those guardrails. So it is important that we continue to maintain the integrity of that plan. And if we're able to do so, and we have a commission that, again, is truly listening to the residents, I think that's doable. You do want to have a little bit of growth. A little bit of growth is important because it generates additional tax revenues. And that also is important to hold down taxes for the residents who are currently here. So I would leave it at that.
The largest fiscal item by any measure that you will be faced with during your 4-year tenure, starting in January, is the funding of a station in Stuart. A lot of folks are opposed to the station, but the facts are clear. A long list of items were part of a lawsuit settlement some years back over this issue. All parties in the settlement, including Martin County, agreed that the Brightline would need to put a station somewhere in the Treasure Coast. Much later, the joint application to Brightline by the county and Stuart won out over Fort Pierce's application. Many folks are excited, many are concerned. The city and county are on the hook for a combined $45 million of the estimated $60 million cost, and the county is donating roughly 2.5 acres for the site. If Martin County cannot secure state or federal or other funding for its $15 million commitment, how will the county pay for this while you are the commissioner, Mr. D'Ambra, and then Ms. Thomas?
You have 1 minute.
Thank you. The agreement, as you've already indicated, has already been approved. My personal belief is that the county should not be expending taxpayer funds as a general philosophical point of view for what is a private enterprise. So to your point, there needs to be a significant effort to obtain either federal or state monies. The only exception I would make to that is if somebody, and I don't believe that the county's actually done this at this point, somebody could come forward with an economic analysis that showed that the financial benefits to the county and the revenue stream that would be generated would offset the cost over a reasonable period of time, let's say 7 to 10 years. If that was forthcoming and you could actually demonstrate that clearly, that might be an exception to what I just said. But absent that, I believe that the county should not be in the business of funding the station at this point in time.
Thank you. Absolutely, the ad valorem taxes do not need for funding that station, and it is a done deal. There has been a economic survey or done. You see its impact, and that's why I say you make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. There is going to be some advantage to it. So to add to and speak to that there is the opportunity to recover some of those costs as they move forward. I have been, in speaking with staff, I've spoken to staff about this because this is a huge concern to the people in Martin County. And I have been assured that there will not be any taxpayers' money for this project. So they are determined, from what I understand, to find a way.
Yes, I am for the Brightline station in concept, but as a small business owner for the last 31 years, everything has to be bought and paid for. That's the way I look at it. And it's going to depend on when we have to stroke the check and what our finances look like at the time. The plan is for Martin County to pay $15 million and for the city of Stuart to pay $30 million, and for us to get state grants that knock those numbers down, and We will be hopeful that those state grants come through. If they don't, I think that could bring into question about whether or not we could afford it.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to our next question, we're going to talk about the Waterside project. It'll be slide number 3. If you could please listen to the history of this project, as it's a representation of the intense pressure to move the urban service boundary. There will be 2 questions at the end of this. The land for the proposed Waterside development was originally zoned agriculture. In 2010, during the Great Recession, a portion was rezoned commercial waterfront industrial in hopes of spurring jobs in our local economy for one of our most important industries, the marine industry. This included an approval for a 500,000 square foot building. However, at the time of the approval, it was not realized by the county or the applicant that the Army Corps of Engineers had a perpetual easement to the waterfront portion, making the waterfront inaccessible and the project not viable. The land remained undeveloped until 2020, when the Coulter Group purchased the land and proposed the KL Waterside Industrial Park project with a 1 million square foot plus warehouse, over double the size of the original building approval. Coulter requested to swap the agricultural portion that abutted Canner Highway with the industrial commercial portion that abutted 96th Street, in large part to avoid more traffic and semis along 96 because of Crystal Lake Elementary School that is located there, as well as the residential homes. In 2022, Coulter broke ground after the comp plan amendment was approved with conditions, notably among slide 4. No change. Uses on the subject property shall be limited to non-residential uses. Residential uses shall not be permitted. Secondly, staff recommended approval with no net loss in agriculture land, no increase in urban land. Also, in 2022, Coulter parceled off the agriculture portion of the parcel and purchased an abutting agricultural parcel of nearly 100 acres. Coulter, along with the same land planner that represented the industrial park, is now proposing the following. Slide 5. Waterside is requesting a comp plan amendment and land use change for its proposal of 1,000 single-family homes with a density of 2.7 units per acre. That's nearly 3 homes per acre on land currently zoned for 1 unit per 20 acres. There is a balance between economic opportunity, land rights, and protection of our western agricultural lands. This case is an example of the lands that are closest to the urban service boundary are on a hotbed for developers requesting exceptions, even when previously assured there would be no net loss of agricultural lands or use for residential properties. There's 2 questions. The first, as a commissioner, how do you approach proposals like the Waterside project, which involves developing 1,000 single-family homes on land initially designated to remain agricultural and non-residential?
As I understand this proposed development called Waterside, that would require the movement of the urban services boundary, which is a major comprehensive plan amendment. And for that reason, I don't believe I would be able to support it. I understand the need for economic development in Martin County. And commercial and industrial can be good for the tax base, but it needs to be done inside the urban services boundary. We have other projects that could help us with commercial and industrial and help us with our tax base, but we need to do that within the urban services boundary and not outside of the urban services boundary.
Well, looking at the history, you have to abide by I would require that it be abided by the agreement and the history of it, stating that, okay, if we do this, then we'll never do this. That was a part of the agreement. You got to hold their feet to the fire. That's just the way that it is.
Thank you, Mr. D'Ambra.
When they purchase the land, and this is true for anyone, when you know what it is zoned for, what the comprehensive plan provides for, you go into it with that knowledge, and so you know what you're committing yourself to. To come back later and then say, well, now we want to change it to our benefit, my personal view on that is no. You knew what you were buying at that time. You need to live according to that. The one thing that Casey, you and I have talked about is the concept of clustering. So if they have 1,000 acres and they can build 50 homes, one home per 20 acres, I'm not opposed to the idea of them saying, okay, just like Newfield, let's cluster it. We'll build 50 homes on 100 acres. The other 900 acres we commit to maintaining as agricultural or open land space. That kind of development has less of a scar on the land, and it preserves a significant amount of open space, which is what our goal is. So something that kind of concept is something I'd be open to, but what they're proposing now, absolutely not.
Thank you. I'm going to give you a little bit more time because the urban service boundary is probably one of the biggest issues for residents here in Martin County. And this really is a representative project of the pressure that is on our urban service boundary. So as a follow-up question, and I'll start with you, Mr. D'Ambra, and I'll give you 2 minutes on this question. In such cases, do you prioritize adhering to the comprehensive plan, or are there circumstances under which you would consider granting exceptions due to the proximity of the urban service boundary? For example, the EAR report or evaluation and appraisal report required to be completed once every 7 years could recommend additional residential capacity.
There's no question over time things can change, but at this point I would say we adhere to the comprehensive plan. The one exception is the one I just mentioned, and that's not really an exception, it's a slight tweaking. When we lived in Maryland, we bought into a community called Paternal Gift Farm. And Howard County, Maryland was somewhat similar to Martin County, and that was primarily a rural agricultural county. Now, in the area that we were in, the land use requirements were a little bit different. It was one home for every 3 acres. So there was a family farm. Parents had passed away. The siblings had inherited it. One of the siblings had already built a house on the property. They went to the county and said, look, instead of building 35 homes on 105 acres and disrupting the entire land plot, let us build 35 homes on 35 acres, and we're going to preserve the rest of the land as natural woodlands and pasture. The key was that as it was being built out, the land actually transferred to the homeowners, and there were deed restrictions that prevented that land from ever being developed. And I happened to be the first president of Paternal Gift Farm at the time of the land transfer. So when you look out at the western land areas, let's say you've got 1,000 acres and maybe you have a similar situation. Parents have owned it, they passed away. Now it's in the hands of siblings and they want to get some land value out of it. They could sell 1,000 acres and you could put 50 homes on there. But that, again, you're disturbing 1,000 acres of land and you're putting infrastructure in over 1,000 acres. And then when fire and police have to go, service that area, it's a bit more of a challenge. So if you said, okay, well, we'll allow clustering so you can build, again, maybe you build 50 homes on 100 acres, but the other 900 are preserved in such a way through deed restrictions or conservation easements, they can never be developed. That could be actually something that would benefit the landowner, but at the same time, achieve the goals I think the residents in the county has, which is preserving open space and maintaining that rural environment without any increasing of density being permitted.
Mr. D'Ambra, before I go to you, Ms. Gibbs-Thomas, I'm going to have a follow-up on that.
Sure.
So the Rural Lifestyle Amendment really is the amendment that addresses cluster housing, but you have to have a minimum of 1,000 acres.
Right.
Waterside is 375 acres. So would you consider a comp plan amendment if we're not going to go into the financials if it's feasible for them,
Right.
but if they said, okay, we're going to put 200 of the acres into conservation, would you consider a comp plan amendment for that?
Not if it changed the density. I mean, they'd have to live with the density of, one home for every 20 acres. So if they were willing to do that, and then you'd have to have a standard as, okay, what percentage of the land are you preserving? And Discovery did 70%, but maybe in this case, the objective would be an 80 or 90% land preservation. But I would not allow for a change in density. So they'd have to live by that.
Thank you. I'll go to you now, Ms. Gibbs-Thomas.
And looking at this and talking about the rural lifestyle, I think the difference here is to take advantage of that rural lifestyle, preventing sprawl. Because to pierce that urban service boundary in order to take advantage of that, it cannot go further than that. The water and the sewer, those utilities are stopped right there. It's not at a future date. 30 years from now, there's another project that comes along. Okay, we'll just attach to this. It will not happen. So you cannot, you're not going to have that urban sprawl. And I think that is the concern. So this right here, there is no guarantee that it will stop here, that urban sprawl and going past. So if they're able to, get in within that boundary, and you talk about that, the ear report, yeah, that is required. However, I think that there is enough adjustments that the state with the county does not have to step in and say, you guys need to do your job better. We're going to do it for you. I don't see that happen. So, for this, I don't think that it applies, doesn't need to.
Yes, I believe that the most fundamental thing in the Martin County Comprehensive Plan is the urban services boundary. That is what has made our county different than other counties. I don't see the need to move the urban services boundary at this time. There is still property to be developed inside the urban services boundary. And then also, when we look at what is coming with the community called Newfield, which is 4,500 houses in Western Palm City, and when you look at what is coming in Indiantown, which is a massive expansion of Indiantown, they're breaking ground now on 2,500 new homes. So between development opportunities that are left inside the urban services boundary and Newfield and Indiantown, I don't think we need to move the urban services boundary anytime soon.
Let's talk about water quality, and we could do our entire 90 minutes on water quality, but we can't. So we'll talk about it from a recreational standpoint and a geographical standpoint, and specifically the Indian River Lagoon that you have a slide for that we're showing our audience. It starts well north of us up in Volusia County and runs south to the Jupiter Inlet in Palm Beach County. So that's 6 counties in length. And it runs also the entire length of the town of Jupiter Island. Many locals are purists and call it the Indian River Lagoon. Others call it the Intracoastal Waterway. The purists would include the late, great Nathaniel Reed. Earlier, I mentioned Nat Reed's father, the storied pioneer and civic leader of early Jupiter Island, and his son, Nathaniel or Nat, is more well known in the community to a degree. He's pictured here for our audience. He revered the Indian River Lagoon. We spent a good amount of time talking about it when I worked in Tallahassee. And as all the locals know, he worked very hard to protect it for many decades. Here he is with President Ford during his time serving as Assistant Secretary over Federal Public Lands and Wildlife. Nathaniel Reed also co-authored the Endangered Species Act with a small team. He worked with multiple Florida governors to stop dredging and do better by the environment. And back to the Indian River Lagoon slide and map, and Martin County, the total's 181 miles for the entire watershed. But for today, let's focus on the fact that our St. Lucie River dead ends essentially into the Indian River Lagoon. So when the federal government lowers the water within the Lake Okeechobee Dike and whatever toxic algae is in there comes east, it goes into the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary, and that has horrific consequences. One of the next pictures we're showing the audience is from 2005. This is a worker skimming the algae in the St. Lucie River in 2005. He's not over near Okeechobee or Palm City or even Stewart. This worker is farther east in Sewell's Point. Specifically, he is at Hogg's Cove, a freshwater estuary in the St. Lucie River. His boss said to the Treasure Coast newspapers when they took this photo, 7 years of my work has gone to hell in 1 week. To me, it looks like a portalet now. This is painting the picture for our new residents, perhaps, since the 2020 pandemic, who moved to the area recently, so they understand why their neighbors at the block party are jumping up and down when you mention Lake Okeechobee. So here's the question. What is your experience with Lake Okeechobee issues? And what is your favorite waterway in Martin County, and how do you plan to protect it?
Yes, well, first I would start by saying that our 3 great rivers are the lifeblood of our community, and the rivers are the Indian River, the St. Lucie River, and to the south of us, the Loxahatchee River. We can do a lot as county commissioners to improve the water quality in our rivers. We can buy conservation lands to store and clean water before it's returned to the rivers. We can move our septic tanks to the sewer system, and we can advocate with our state and federal partners for their contributions toward improving our rivers. My favorite waterway as a District 3 guy would have to be the Loxahatchee River to the south of us, and that's a unique perspective because most people in Martin County live in Stewart, Jensen Beach, and Palm City, and would probably talk about the Indian River and the St. Lucie River. But J.D. Park and the Loxahatchee River have always been a big part of our lives.
Oh, that one's kind of tough, because Martin County has so many beautiful water places, waterways. But I have to say, Indiantown sits right on the banks of the St. Lucie Canal. What they call that, the St. Lucie River, St. Lucie Canal. I grew up actually skiing, water skiing, which is kind of hard to believe at this point in my life. But I have seen some changes in dealing with it. The 2008, and our monies come from the federal and the state government. We have to make sure that we get that steadied. Also, the C-24 reservoir that was built out there was built in direct response to trying to keep that estuaries, the lagoon, safer and cleaner. And that has opened up, and hopefully more projects like that.
Mr. D'Ambra.
You know, the clean water issue is as Susan's alluded to, is complicated because it is a partnership between the federal government, the state government, county government, and truly the local government. As you alluded to, Jupiter Inlet or Jupiter Island, we've got a long stretch of that island that's bounded by that water. And it obviously feeds down into Jupiter Inlet, which is Tequesta. So when I was in Tequesta, we were impacted by that as well. So it really is a matter of working closely and putting as much pressure as we can on the various governmental entities to provide the necessary funding, make them continue to educate them on the seriousness of the issue, the impact it has on people's lives, and the necessity of providing proper funding. I mean, we've got the Everglades Restoration Project that still needs to be completed. We've got, as you said, the discharges from the Lake Okeechobee, which Brian Mass has been at the forefront of trying to address that at the federal level with the Army Corps of Engineers. But we've got concerns about the Loxahatchee River. That's a scenic designated river. And my time's up, so I'll stop
we're
right
up with
there.
time. Thank you. It's a big topic for a minute.
But I'll give you another chance.
Okay.
Here's a follow-up
Yes.
so you can continue that line of thought, both of you. We have a lot of partners and local governments north of the lake, and we haven't really completely maximized perhaps all of the interchange that could happen and interlocal partnerships in that regard to really stop what's going into the lake in the first place.
Yes.
So while we have this massive effort to clean what comes out of Lake Okeechobee, a lot of, especially charter boat captains, I would say, would like us to focus more, as the county has tried to do with some limited success, on what's going into the lake in the first place. That way, the United States Army Corps of Engineers isn't the bad guy all the time for releasing the level of the lake. For newer residents to Martin County, they may not know that is an issue that has to happen. It's a dike. So there are engineering considerations to always be had. So talk about north of the lake and what ideas you might have. Mr. D'Ambra, one minute.
No, that's a great question, and it's a great point. Again, obviously, completion of the Everglades restoration is an important component for waters flowing south. But you're right. When you look north and you look at the county surrounding the lake with sugar plantations, et cetera, there's a lot that can be, believe that can be accomplished there, but it's going to take a concerted effort on an ongoing basis. One of the things in terms of my running for the commission that I would offer up is As I say to my wife, I'm technically retired, but I don't want to be. So for me, this is got to be a full-time occupation, a full-time job. And I understand the nuances of having to deal with multiple levels of government. So for me, this would be a very high priority to target, because you're right. It isn't just about what comes out. It's about what's going in. And the levels of toxicity in Lake Okeechobee are really embarrassing and really do need to be confronted as part of this overall cleanup effort.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. If we look to what's north of the lake, it's not Big Sugar. Big Sugar is south of the lake. What's north of the lake is residents, fertilizers. It's all things, because the Army Corps of Engineers, yeah, they're the kind of the bad guys, and they've had to backstep from that, and they've returned the Kissimmee River back to meandering to that natural filtration system. And we're going to have to help that with what's coming out of, we're talking those urban areas, those metropolitan areas. You're talking Orlando, Kissimmee, what's all north of the lake. That is what needs to be dealt with now, because restoring the Everglades, restoring the Kissimmee River, making C-24, that's all in trying to deal with what's coming out. So we're going to have to work with the government and the state from what's coming to us from the north.
Yes, Lake Okeechobee is an extremely complex thing. The state of Lake Okeechobee involves all types of stakeholders, agriculture, conservationists, and environmentalists, and a lot of the problem in Lake Okeechobee is to the north of the lake and the water that's coming into it from Central Florida. A lot has been done by the state of Florida in recent days to restore the natural water flow in the Kissimmee River, which is an awesome thing. And we in Martin County should certainly be partnering with neighboring counties, and particularly ones to the north of us, to do all that we can to advocate for Lake Okeechobee and our rivers to the east and to the west of Lake Okeechobee.
We're wrapping up in our closing questions here, and this is a good one to wrap up on because we're going to mention Commissioner Harold Jenkins, who has had this seat for 4 years, and something that's important, I know, to him, and that is our relationship, the county's relationship with Tallahassee and the concept of home rule. Jupiter Island's mayor and town commissioners unanimously passed a resolution in the 2024 session that we just finished in the spring against so-called sovereign immunity bills. Generally speaking, they will be back again in the next session. They didn't pass this session, but it allows for people to sue the local government for tort cases. If someone's physically injured, they sue a sheriff's office, a public hospital, a city, a county, as you know. The current caps are less than $1 million, and at one point in recent years, the legislature proposed raising them to $4 million and up per incident, per person. I'm oversimplifying the issue a little bit to be quick and say this. Commissioner Jenkins was telling anyone who would listen that home rule doesn't mean much anymore in today's environment. Something in Pensacola or Jacksonville may not work for Martin County or the city of Stuart or someone else, but he regularly would point out that state legislators go to Tallahassee, can't fight the leadership on mandates put on local government in these one-size-fits-all exercises, and then come back home and only talk about the good stuff they did. And they do good things. On a lot of issues, his hands were tied, and he wished state legislators would justify to the community directly why we were having unfunded mandates. And he would have to say, well, I'm sorry, the state makes us do that. How do you plan to work with our delegation on home rule and the idea that the local government serves its local citizens the best? Mr. D'Ambra and then Ms. Thomas.
Again, another very, very good question. I think our founding fathers believed that government closest to the people was where the majority of the responsibilities should lie. And you're right. What ends up happening is sometimes people who start out in local government and then get to the state level or the federal level kind of forget where they came from. And when they were local, they wanted that control. But all of a sudden, when they move up the ranks, they still want that control. But in so doing it, they're taking it away from the local area. So, Live Local, for example, was an example of that. So I am very passionate about home rule. I believe that the legislature, in many cases, has overstepped its bounds. And again, I think it's a matter of gathering people together, particularly among the counties and the local municipalities, putting as much pressure or persuading our state representatives that power should be emanating, its strongest point should be at the local level, and persuading them to give that power back to people here on a local basis.
Yes, home rule is a very important thing, and something that has been rather devalued in recent years by our state legislature. And what's interesting is I think I know their motives. They're trying to not so much control counties like ours that are pretty much in sync with their political philosophy, but they're trying to control excesses in other counties that are doing things that are very much out of sync with the political philosophy that is dominant in Tallahassee and which is mirrored in our community. But we need to help our legislators understand our local issues and how home rule should still be respected.
Thank you. Ms. Thomas.
Thank you. And to kind of clarify, Commissioner Jenkins has sat in that seat for 8 years.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, not 4 years. Also, and yes, our reps, our representatives on the state level are very responsive. They listen. I've had the opportunity to sit on the Florida League of Cities board. Also, I'm currently on the Florida League of Mayors board. And those organizations are all about home rule, and they make sure that their members are very aware of what's happening in Tallahassee, so we can all speak out in order to make sure that home rule is not overtaken by the state. And that's the reason Indiantown Incorporated was for home rule. So it's something that we have to preserve, we have to work for, and we have to work together in order to make sure that happens. Each municipality, each county, working together for the same purpose.
Well, thank you very much, candidates. We want to allow you both fantastic questions and answers. I know you were put on the hot seat again. None of these questions were released ahead of time. And before we go to our last slide, we want to give you an opportunity for closing and give you each a minute. We started with Miss Susan Gibbs Thomas. So to close, we'll start with Mr. Frank D'Ambra III.
Well, I think I bring a pretty unique skill set as a candidate. I had the large business experience, which I alluded to earlier. I've also had an entrepreneurial experience when we moved down to Florida. I was a founding investor and CEO of a local medical device company, which I was with for 7 years. I've had the public service experience in Tequesta, where I served on the council there for 9.5 years, served as mayor and vice mayor. So when I look at, what I bring to the table in terms of Martin County, my experience, my knowledge, my skill sets, I think it's a unique combination. We talked about the budget earlier, $670 million. In my large corporate experience, like I said, I had $100 million plus budgets, lots of employees. We talked about Six Sigma and what's unique about Six Sigma in terms of process improvements and helping businesses and governments operate effectively and efficiently. And I think the most important thing is I listen. I wouldn't even be running if I hadn't listened to the great many people out there who said, hey, we need you to run. You can make a difference. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
I want to thank the town of Jupiter Island for sponsoring this event, and Casey Ingram and Kelly Lehman for being the moderators of this event. It's a great joy to be with you today. Together, we can do great things. We can preserve the Martin County difference by upholding our comprehensive plan and slowing down the amendments to that plan. We can also improve the water quality in our three great rivers, the Indian River, the St. Lucie River, and the Loxahatchee River. And lastly, we can work hard to keep our taxes in line. I think my experience as a private sector small business owner will help us in this way to stretch dollars and to find efficiencies in our county budget. Those are a few of my priorities. I ask for your vote on August 20th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity, and I've enjoyed and I've appreciated the past 6+ years that I've sat out in Indiantown on that council and served the people of Indiantown and Martin County, bringing a municipality to life. It has been a great learning experience and has given me the opportunity to build relationships with the residents, with businesses, and with leadership across the county and also statewide. And in working in that capacity in a municipality within Martin County, I think sitting on the Martin County Commission, it would bring a different perspective to that commission in dealing with the local municipalities within the county. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate the opportunity that I've had in serving this county.
Thank you very much. And I think you want to finish up with let's vote.
We do. We have a slide for folks that we just wanted to share how any voter in Martin County can still request a vote by mail ballot. It must be done by Thursday, August 8th at midnight. But don't wait, because the Supervisor of Elections Office team reminds us that they may need to verify an address if you are asking them to send to a different one than what you have on record in Martin County, and so on. So please obtain that ballot so you can vote and return it prior to August 20th, Election Day. And if you are not voting in person, this is a wonderfully convenient way to vote. This slide just happens to show that as of about July 28th, already 4,500 absentee or vote by mail ballots have been returned to the supervisor's office. So it looks like we're on trend for a good turnout for the primary election. People understand that this particular seat will be decided on August 20 from among these three candidates, and they're responding in kind. Thank you again, Casey, for a wonderful program.
My pleasure, Kelly. And I just want to follow up a little bit on the voting, and that is all Martin County races will be decided on August 20. And you don't have to live in District 3 to vote for District 3 candidates. You vote for all of the candidates that are on the ballot. So I want to point that out. Please get involved. It's super important to be a part of the democracy. And it was my pleasure. Thank you to Jupiter Island for sponsoring this wonderful forum. And thank you, Susan Gibbs Thomas, Frank D'Ambra, and Blake Capps as well. Thank you.
Thank you.